Hi, everybody. I'm Lily Kazemi, and I am the editor of the DAOFitlive blog, which is a fitness blog for busy professionals who want to be fit but don't have the time to figure it out. And this is our YouTube channel broadcast. So if you're watching on YouTube and you haven't already, please like and subscribe. So it's our fourth live event and our second in our series on springing into fitness. So today is Friday, April 8th, and we are slowly crawling towards the summer. In our first episode on springing into fitness, we covered some habits that you can be changing right now to get well on your path to fitness. And if you missed that, no worries. I'll include the link in the description. And you should still be able to follow along today. So today we are going to talk about nutrition labels. Now, I had a much more ambitious agenda before where I was going to cover a few other topics, but I realized in sort of rehearsing on nutrition labels that I have so much to say and there's so much important stuff to cover that we only have half an hour. So I'm going to focus this entire discussion on how you can become a whiz at reading nutrition labels. And we will save and table the other topics, including learning how to count calories and macros for the next time. So you'll just have to tune in again in 2 weeks. So with that, we'll get started. I must first caveat that I am not a doctor. I'm a lawyer by trade, and I am also not a nutrition licensed expert, but I have had years of experience making fitness my side hustle and gotten a lot of great professional advice along the way. So I'm really eager to share with you what I know about nutrition labels today. So let's launch into the discussion. So I'll start by mentioning Ted Bundy, somebody you might be familiar with. I don't know if any of you guys watched the Netflix documentary recently, and it had Zac Efron playing Ted Bundy. Now, Zac Efron, as you know, is a rather attractive Hollywood actor. They picked him for a reason because Ted Bundy was an attractive and charming man. And his attraction and his charm in later studies, it was found, enabled him to lure and gain the trust of his 30 victims. Now, how is this relevant to nutrition labels? Well, I'll explain it to you. They both have an important thing in common, which is a principle of psychology called the halo effect. So the halo effect, essentially, by packaging something in a nice, attractive exterior, leads to a confirmation bias whereby we process the rest of the information in a way that filters out the rest of the negative. So picture yourself in a grocery store right now. And what do you see when you look at different products? You only see the front of them. The nutrition label isn't shown. That's not what faces out. So most of the products you see come in very attractive packages and in very prominent letters. There are slogans that will immediately create this halo effect. For example, keto friendly, fat free, low carb, Whole30 compliant, non-GMO, organic. We've all seen these. So that even if you actually take the time to turn it around and look at what's on the back, you've already got this confirmation bias that the halo effect produces. So what we're going to do today is break down some of the components of a nutrition label and what you should be looking for. So if you have a better sense of what to look for as you're reading it, you are less likely to be swept away by this halo effect and make informed decisions about what you're eating and how much of it. So with that, I will start with a little bit of a presentation. So you should all hopefully be able to see this. We're only going to go through one slide. I promise this won't be a lecture. But just to show you what you're getting into when you look at nutrition labels, and and it actually doesn't seem to be on this. Sorry. I think I loaded up the wrong deck, but actually I can go ahead and share my screen and show you. So you have to bear with me on technology here, everyone. So hopefully you can see this if I also put it into presentation mode, presenter view. Okay, so hopefully you guys can see this, and I'll just have to rely on my faith that you can. But these are the components of a nutrition label. So the first thing that most people generally, divert their eyes to is the top of it. The calories are in very prominent display. But what most people a lot of the times miss is the serving size. So the serving size on this particular label, it's often expressed as a fraction of a cup. So serving size is 2/3 of a cup. And oftentimes the serving size is actually a lot less than what people actually end up eating. For example, ice cream is often expressed in a serving size of half a cup. But this much, as we went over last time in portion sizes, this is only half a cup of ice cream. And I don't know about you, but I eat a lot more ice cream than that. Then as you go, you also see the number of servings per container, which is also important to pay attention to, because a lot of times we'll tend to eat something by the bag, right? So if you sit down with a whole bag of something, it's very easy to just go through half the bag or maybe even the whole bag. And so you want to know how many servings are actually in that container. And I did say that we would touch on macronutrients, so I'll try to keep my promise. But the 3 macronutrients are fat, protein, and carbohydrates. So you see the fat here, and fat is 9 calories per gram, whereas protein and carbs are 4 calories per gram. So generally, the higher the fat content, the more of a percentage of the product is going to be attributable to calories from fat. And then another element you want to pay attention to is sodium. So the recommended sodium intake per day is 2,300 milligrams for adults. And often salt makes foods tasty. So a lot of the packaged foods are high in sodium. So carbohydrates, we're going to get into the concept of net carbs when we actually start looking at some of these products. But another element that I wanted to call out right now is sugar. So in our wellness culture right now, sugar is pretty much the devil incarnate. Like, that is the opposite of the halo effect. So foods that boast that they are low in sugar or don't have sugar often create this confirmation bias. So here you see the total sugar, but what you want to pay attention to is the amount of added sugar. So that's a sugar that's not naturally occurring in the product. And a perfect example is fruit juice. So fruit juice is one of those products that has the halo effect because we all know fruit is very healthy, right? But fruit juice also contains added sugars, whereas the fruit itself that you would eat has natural sugar, which is fructose, and it also has natural fiber, which slows the absorption of sugar into the bloodstream, whereas fruit juice often has 0 fiber. So that's when you're looking at this line item here. So you want to pay attention to the amount of sugars. One thing that is not on here, and I'm just going to go ahead and stop sharing. One thing that is not on that particular label is the listing of the ingredients. And that's also a very important part of the package to look at, because the way that the ingredients are listed are in descending order of amount. So basically, the first 3 ingredients you see on the package are most of what the food is made out of. So if sugar is in one of those first 3 ingredients, then the product is generally pretty high in sugar. Now, sugar isn't always listed as sugar. It's listed as many different names. In fact, there are over 50 different names for sugar. So that includes dextrose, high fructose corn syrup, brown rice syrup, tapioca syrup. There's also lots of different types of artificial sweeteners, and we'll go into that when we go into it later. So just beware that it's not always going to call out the fact that it's sugar on the package, and that reading the ingredients is important. Now, reading the ingredients, you may feel a lot of times like you're reading Greek or some other language. So as we get into the products, I'm actually going to do a little bit of a translation of what some of these ingredients means, because it can get pretty complicated. So with that, let's go ahead and get started. So let's start with a snack or a breakfast food. So this right here is a popular cereal. As you can see, it definitely has the halo effect going for it with this big bowl, and it looks like very chocolatey and yummy. Kind of reminds me of the Count Chocula cereal that I had as a kid. And right off the bat, the label says keto friendly. So what exactly does that mean? So, I'm not on the ketogenic diet, but still a label like that just like creates this automatic, this is definitely a healthy food. So let's turn it around. This also says non-GMO. And if you're curious about what GMO means, it means a genetically modified organism. So basically, for a food to be non-GMO by law, it doesn't even have to have 0 GMOs. It can have less than 1% of GMOs to qualify as non-GMO. And it's actually pretty funny because a lot of times food manufacturers put non-GMO as a label on a food that naturally wouldn't have GMOs anyway. Like, there are tomatoes labeled as non-GMO, but there are no GMO tomatoes. So this is a pretty fun fact that basically means a lot of times this non-GMO label is meaningless. So let's turn it around. And I know that you guys can't see this, it's backwards, but I'll read the facts to you. So as we went through on the page, looking at the number of serving sizes. So there are 7 servings in this, and this is not a very big package here. So the serving size that they suggest is half a cup, and that's 110 calories. So again, and I filled it up with the cereal. This is half a cup. This isn't going to cut it for me. I think most people would eat at least a cup of it. So I poured that in a bowl to show you how much that is. I kind of have to almost tip the bowl over. But I mean, it's a decent amount of cereal. Oh, by the way, this is a bowl where you can separate the milk. I really like using those for cereal. But so assuming then you have a reasonable, so what I do is when I'm evaluating the nutritional information, I think about, well, like, how much am I actually going to eat? And then I just do a little math in my head. So basically, I'm going to eat a cup, which is going to be 220 calories. So for the half cup, it's 6 grams of fat. So, okay, that's 12 grams of fat. And then we get to the carbs. So you remember on the front, it said keto friendly. So I think most people know that the keto diet is generally a very low carb diet. It's like a low carb diet on steroids. And we'll get into the philosophy of this diet on a future one. Let me know in the comments or just offline if you guys want me to do one of these webinars about the different types of diets, because I do have a very extensive blog post on it. But if you want me to hear explain it, I would love to do that. So basically, so the Paleo Foundation basically says that items can be labeled, and this is not the FDA, right? This is sort of like an unofficial organization. Items can be keto friendly if they are 8 grams or less of carbs, because on this keto diet, generally the limitation of grams of carbs per day is 50, and in a lot of cases 20, because if you eat more grams than that, you will no longer be in ketosis, which is essentially required for the diet to work. So you might be thinking, well, how can this have 14 grams of carbs and be keto friendly? Well, the answer is with this net carbs angle. So it's got 14 grams of carbs, and 9 grams of fiber. So the philosophy behind those who support the concept of net carbs is that you don't look at the total carbs, you subtract out the fiber, because essentially the fiber causes the digestion that cancels out the corresponding amount of carbs. So therefore, there would only be 5, 9 plus 5 is 14, net carbs left in the amount that you're eating. Therefore, keto friendly. But the science of net carbs, a lot of it is not confirmed, and there's definitely plenty of literature and debate on both sides about whether you count the net carbs or the total carbs. And I'm not going to take a stand here. I don't have enough qualifications to, but it's important that you be aware of this generally as you're reading these labels and deciphering keto friendly. This is how they get to be able to make that claim. So these are some things to know. And by the way, as I'm going through these products, I am neither endorsing nor opposing any of them. In fact, I mean, I have consumed all of these. There are things that I like about all of them. For example, this cereal, it's really crunchy, and the crunchier food I eat, the more satisfied I feel. So I definitely would buy this cereal. So this is just information. It's just collecting data. And based on your particular goals and your particular needs, you decide whether you put it in your cart and pay the $10 for this like little bag of cereal, or if you put it back. All right. So let's move on then to the next product. So I'd like to talk about bread and grains. All right. So we all, unless you're on some low carb diet, generally whole grains are regarded as, quote, healthy foods. Okay. So when you read the label of a bread, like you want to pick out some kind of whole grain bread, like say you want to pick out bread to make a sandwich. So you've got an example of this bread, which is like, bread wraps that when you first look at it, oh, it is made with non-GMO ingredients. Okay, that's great. And then it also has 100% whole grain. But when you turn it around and look at the ingredients, a key thing to look at is what kind of flour and how they describe the grains, okay? Because here, the ingredients after water includes enriched wheat flour. And so unless something says whole wheat or whole grain, it is actually not a whole grain. Enriched wheat flour essentially is the grain stripped out of its nutrients so that, that enhances the taste and makes it taste more like white bread. And essentially it has the same nutritional value as white bread. So you really want to watch out when these breads claiming to be whole grain, and they may have some whole grains, but if they're claiming to be, you have to watch out for whether they contain enriched wheat flour. Compare that to this type of bread. So this is a sprouted grain bread that I like to have. Looking at the ingredients on this one, you see it is, sorry about the crackling. So it's organic sprouted wheat, organic sprouted barley, organic sprouted millet, which is a grain, organic malted barley. So basically these are all sprouted grains. There's no type of flour here. So for that reason, this is a great type of bread that I like to get, because I'm more trusting about the label of the whole grain on this bread. Whereas for a different type of bread, when I turn it around and see it has enriched wheat flour, I'll tend to know that means it has some refined grains in it as well. Okay, so moving along to another type of snack with a halo effect. This is a really big example here because this has the word skinny right on it. So skinny popcorn. And this was my the bane of my existence for a while, because I challenge you to buy a bag of this and not get through like most of it by the end of one sitting. I mean, it was very difficult for me as I set up to just smell this popcorn as I opened it and not eat any. It has a very addictive and good flavor. So right off the bat, though, when you look at the front and you look for the halo effects, it's only 43 calories per cup, okay, and non-GMO and gluten-free. And the thing about gluten-free and the halo effect about that is, unless you have celiac disease, generally avoiding gluten is really not going to benefit you. It certainly is not, something that will make you lose weight as opposed to a product containing gluten. So like, again, this gluten-free is one of those words to create the confirmation bias before you look at the back of the product. Okay. So then we look at the back of the product and they have 6.7 servings. So that's just essentially about 7 servings for this whole thing. And the serving size that they suggest, it's actually a pretty reasonable serving size. It's 3.5 cups. So I went and I measured what 3.5 cups is. And that's about this is a pretty good bowl of popcorn. I mean, it's a big bowl of popcorn. So for 150 calories, and it's about it's 9 grams of fat, 15 grams of carbs, no added sugar. I mean, it's actually a pretty decent snack if you stick to the serving size. But the tricky thing about these snacks is that a lot of times, we're not going to measure it out. We might fill up a bowl, but then like I used to do in the past, I'd fill up a bowl and then before I knew it, the bowl would be gone and I would go get another bowl, or I might just like top off the bowl that I have. And especially if you're sharing it with someone, then you're really like, don't have a concept of how much you're eating. So that's why portion sizes are important. And, mindless eating is also important to try to avoid. I mean, what I do to make the popcorn last longer is I try to eat it, one kernel at a time. And then the popcorn goes away a lot more slowly because I'm not going to not eat popcorn. That's just not an option. And again, it's just this isn't a guidance of like what to eat versus what to put back. It's just a guidance of like knowing the data, like what is the data that I am getting about this particular food. So let me move on to the next example. I mentioned fat-free earlier. And this concept of fat-free was a little bit more prevalent in the 90s, if you remember, because all of a sudden fat became the mortal enemy. And you had the advent of the snack brands like Snackwells, if you remember, that was all over the place. But I'm going to give an example of what information I would use to choose a yogurt, which is another popular healthy snack. So I have this yogurt and you can see the 0%, it's fat-free. Okay, great. And it's got 16 grams of protein per serving. That's a good amount of protein. Only 120 calories. That sounds pretty good to me. Halo effect is working pretty well on me. But then I'm going to turn it around and look at the serving size. Okay, so the serving size is about 3/4 of a cup. So that is a pretty decent serving size. I'll show you how much that is. That's, most of the time I probably would be closer to a full cup if I'm having yogurt, but then you add about 30 extra calories to get that. So 120, 150. So it's got 0 grams of fat. But the point about fat-free products, and this kind of came out when this Snackwells craze was going on in the 90s. Well, fat is usually responsible for 2 things in a food: flavor and fullness. So when you take out the fat from a product, you basically take away a lot of the flavor and the satisfaction of, the feeling of fullness from eating the food. So when the fat's taken out, they've got to put something into it to make it flavorful and tasty. So that's where the sugar comes in. So in this serving of yogurt, there are 12 grams of sugar from the vanilla flavoring, which includes 8 additional grams of sugar. And reading the ingredients after the milk and the yogurt cultures, sugar is one of the first 5 ingredients in the product. So it definitely has more sugar, and it also has added sugar. Whereas contrasting this with the yogurt that I'm more likely to eat is this kind. So this is a plain Greek yogurt, and this is the quote full fat version. It has 3.5% milk fat. So compared to the other yogurt, it's got 150 calories versus 120. That's not a big difference. But the difference in the calories is because, like I was saying earlier, fat has more calories per gram. So because this actually doesn't have the fat stripped out of it, it's going to have a little bit more calories. It's got 6 grams of fat, and it does have some naturally occurring sugars, but it has 0 grams of added sugar, and it has the same amount of protein. So, I mean, for me, it's just about, like, a lot of it is just personal preference when I'm choosing. This is a lot creamier. I'm more satisfied when I'm eating it. Later down the road, we're going to look at the profile of, like, putting together the building blocks of a meal. So you've got the 3 macronutrients of protein, fat, and carbohydrates, PFC. So this is a food that contains PFC. It has protein, it has fat, and it has some carbohydrate. And so I would rather eat this yogurt, and maybe if I wanted it to taste like vanilla, maybe I would put a little bit of vanilla extract in it, or I would mix it with some fresh fruit, or I would even drizzle a little bit of honey on it and just get, the natural sugar that way. So that's a choice I would make. And I know that eating this yogurt would keep me fuller for longer. So when I was younger, I probably would have just gone straight for the fat-free. But now that a little older and a little wiser, I'll just have the full fat version. So I think we have time for one more example. I don't want to say I saved the best for last. I had a few more, but not time to get to them. So the next example has to do with candy. One of my favorite things to eat. It's like, we still have those lingering childhood habits, but this is a very popular product right here. Smart Sweets. So right off the bat, the halo effect, it's smart, and it's only got 3 grams of sugar. And I mean, there's lots of these brands out there. So where, this is the Swedish fish version. And then you look at the back of it, for this whole bag, it's 100 calories. But what are these made of, and how do they taste like Swedish fish? So, and they do the math for you. They tell me that it's got 42 grams of carbohydrates. So where are all these carbs coming from? Then 13 grams of fiber. So I subtract that out to get net carbs. But then they also subtract out 11 grams of allulose, and allulose falls into a category of a non-digestible carbohydrate. See, it has the ose on it, so it is a type of sugar, but it is, according to the literature on why manufacturers put these in their food, it is not digestible. So they get to subtract it out from the number of carbohydrates to get this 18 grams of net carbs per bag. And so looking at the ingredients, you see allulose is one of the first ingredients. And then you also see this ingredient called isomalto-oligosaccharides. So this is also, I think it's also called IMO for short. This is also a non-digestible carbohydrate. What's interesting about this, though, is that there are studies that show that this type of sweetener, and also other types of these like plant-based sweeteners that are not supposed to count as sugar, actually have the same impact on the blood as blood sugar. So whereas, you've got the real version of this, for 5 pieces, it's 110 calories. But for me, because, our bodies are a lot smarter than I think they are, even if I eat the whole bag of this, I'm not going to really feel like I had Swedish fish. So for me, I'd rather just have a few of these Swedish fish and be satisfied than eat this whole bag, be unsatisfied, and then kind of have these murky claims around how many net carbs these are. And I can tell you, like, personally, this kind, it does not taste like real Swedish fish. So I think I'll hold out for the real thing. So that's all we had time today for on nutrition labels. I hope that was somewhat helpful. I definitely could talk about it a lot more. And next time, I'm definitely happy to talk about food tracking, counting calories and macros, how to get a ballpark idea of how many of those you need per day to start really honing your skills around balancing your diet, because frankly, a lot of times, we don't have as much time to exercise. So your diet and that equation is going to be really important to weight management. So with that, friends, I will end it here. Thanks for bearing with me on the technology. I hope this was still helpful, and I hope everyone has a really awesome and great weekend. Please give me feedback, and I'll see you in a couple of weeks.